So, good morning everybody. Доброго ранку. It's been some time since I last did a live stream like this, but I hope that what we're going to look at today, I hope it's going to be interesting. I hope all of us will have the chance to learn something new. Our topic for today that we're going to be discussing is relative clauses, which is it's an interesting topic because relative clauses are one of those areas that people often have a lot of difficulty with, especially Ukrainian speakers, because in the Ukrainian language relative clauses work a little bit differently in English as they do in Ukrainian. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at the two principal types of relative clause, and in addition to this there will also be a few tasks for you to have a look at, for you to try, so that we can practice the theory. Now it's very important to me, like with this and like with all of my lessons and everything, that everybody understands the idea, everybody understands the point, and so it's going to be I want it to be clear for everybody, exactly what we're talking about. So if you have any questions about what I'm explaining, anything at all that you want to share, or you want to question, you can write a message into the chat. You can write in English or you can write in Ukrainian, whichever is more comfortable for you, and I'll be happy to answer. Similarly, if you do have any other questions about anything else in English, not just about relative clauses, but anything you want to ask about, maybe some grammar, some lexis, or anything like this, please let me know, write it in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So I think we can probably start with the theory that we're going to look at today, first of all, which is about relative clauses. Now, in the English language, we have two principal types of relative clause. We have what we call defining relative clauses and non-defining relative clauses. And we're going to start with having a look at defining relative clauses. And defining relative clauses are probably the more typical type, I would say, like this. So first of all, what is a defining relative clause? So a defining relative clause is one which gives more information about an object, and it makes it clear to the listener or to the reader exactly which one we are talking about. So, for example, if we say, "That's the woman who helped me." Here we have the relative clause "who helped me," and this tells us which woman we are talking about. Because if we just say, "That's the woman," okay, what woman? It's not complete. It's not a finished sentence. And so a defining relative clause tells us exactly which person, object, thing we are talking about. Now, depending on exactly what we are talking about, we have a variety of different pronouns that we use to talk about different things. So if we are talking, first of all, about people, you can use the pronoun who, or you can use the pronoun that. And in this type of relative clause, there is no difference between them. So for example, we have here the example sentence, "The people who work here are very friendly." You can also say, "The people that work here are very friendly." No difference, exactly the same. If we are talking about things or objects, things that are not alive, then we can use which, and again, we can also use that in this situation as well. So, for example, we can say the bus which goes to Rivne leaves from here, or alternatively, the bus that goes to Rivne leaves from here. Again, both options are correct. It's as you prefer. If we want to show possession, that something belongs to somebody else or to something else, then we have to use the word whose in this case. In this situation, that is not possible. That is a mistake, and we cannot use it here. So we have the example of the man whose car was stolen was very upset. So here the car belongs to the man, and so we should use whose in this case. And again, that is a mistake here. So if we say the man that car was stolen, it's not correct. And I hope you can hear that there is something not, sort of šos ne tak in this sentence. If we want to talk about time, then we can use the words when or that. I would say that when is probably more typical. It's probably more usual for people to use when. When we think about who and which, I would say they are equally as used with that. But with when and that, I think when is more typical from a native speaker perspective. So we have the example here of I remember the day when I started school. Here you could say that I remember the day that I started school, but as I said, I think at least from a native speaker position, I think that when is more typical and more usual than using that. And the final relative pronoun that we have here for this set is when we talk about places. And when we talk about places, we usually use the relative pronoun where. So, for example, that's the house where I lived when I was a child. Here, again, we cannot use that as it's written. So, that's the house that I lived when I was a child. That would be a mistake, and we can only use where in this situation. So, for defining relative clauses, these are the basic ideas: who or that for people, which or that for things, whose if we want to show possession, when or that for time, and where if we want to talk about a place. So let's now move forward to our next slide with an extra little nuance that we have here, which is connected to grammatical subject and grammatical object. Now, a relative pronoun, a word like who, which, that, this can be the subject or the object of the relative clause. So, and why this is important, we will see in a moment. So, if we have a look at these two sentences that I've written in the second and third point, the man who lives here is very nice. Here, who is the man. That's who we're talking about. So the man lives here. And so here, who is the subject of the sentence. The man, the subject, lives is the verb, and here, it's a place but functions like as an object. In the second sentence, the man who I met yesterday was very nice. Here, who I met is our relative clause. Who did I meet? I met the man. Who, again, is about the man. But here, who is the object of the sentence, because I am the subject, met is the verb, and the man, this is the object. Now, why is this important? This is important because when the relative pronoun is the object, then we can remove it from the sentence, and we don't need to use it if we don't want to. So, for example, we can say, the man who I met yesterday was very nice, but equally we can say, the man I met yesterday was very nice. And we can skip, we can miss the relative pronoun who, or that in this case, because it is the object of the clause and not the subject. If it is the subject, we always need to use it. So for example, with the sentence that I gave before, the man who lives here is very nice, we cannot skip who in this situation. So we cannot say, the man lives here is very nice. And I'm sure, or I hope to your ears, something is not quite right in this situation. So when it is the grammatical object, then we can skip it and we don't need to use it if we don't want to. Especially, I would say, in spoken English, it's very typical to skip the word when we speak. In written English, it's a little bit different, but when we're speaking, it's very typical to miss the relative pronoun if we can. So we've got one more slide of theory to look at before I give you a couple of tasks to do. As I said before, I understand this is all quite abstract and theory heavy. So if you do have any questions, even if you think it is a tupe zapytania, please write it in the chat. I will see it and I'll be happy to answer any questions if there's anything that you're not sure about or you want me to explain in more detail. So there are a few more nuances to highlight about using defining relative clauses. The first thing to highlight is about prepositions. Now, prepositions are these small words that we use to connect different parts of the sentence. Words like at, on, in, of, with, without. Words like these are prepositions. And with relative clauses, if there is a preposition in the sentence after the verb, then we usually put it at the end of the sentence. So, for example, we have the sentence here, that's the boy who I played football with. And as you can see, the word with is at the end of the sentence. Now, what many Ukrainian speakers say in this situation is, that's the boy with whom I played football. And obviously this is because of the Ukrainian language effect, because you would say z kim ya hrav, ya pohrav, nevажливо. But the important thing is you would always say z kim. But in English, you can say it like this. It's not a mistake to say that's the boy with whom I played football, but it's very formal. It's very, very high register. And so for spoken English, it's very unusual to build a sentence like this. As I said before, I can't say it's wrong because it's not wrong. Grammatically, it works. Grammatically, it's okay. But it's just so formal. It's a very, very unusual way of building your sentences for normal, everyday communicative English. And so because of that, it's in 99.999% of the time, it's always the best idea to put the preposition at the end of the sentence, and then it will be usually in the best place. Now, moving forward from this to another typical mistake is using the word what. We don't usually use what to start a relative clause. There are some very specific situations when you can, but they're sort of a bit beyond our scope for today because they're quite precise. But usually what will be a mistake in this situation? So for example, here are the shoes what I bought. This is a mistake, and we should say here are the shoes which I bought, or here are the shoes that I bought, because this is obviously an object. It's not alive, and so we use which or that for these things. Now, you will hear native speakers using the word what like this in these situations. But it's not correct. It is a mistake. Unfortunately, native speakers of English, like in Ukrainian, we don't always use the exact grammatically correct constructions, but what you should know is that this is a mistake, and that, yeah, we should use which or that if it's something that's not alive. So generally speaking, we should avoid what in relative clauses. And the final point, and this last point is probably the most typical mistake that I see from Ukrainian speakers who are learning English, is that in defining relative clauses, we never, I repeat, never use commas. Using a comma is always a mistake in defining relative clauses. So, for example, I've given you the sentence, I want to buy the shirt, comma, which I saw yesterday. This is wrong, because here we are giving essential, necessary information about the shirt, because if we just say, I want to buy the shirt, okay, what shirt? I don't know which one you're talking about. So this one is necessary information, and so because of this, we should not have a comma in this sentence. So, I want to buy the shirt, which I saw yesterday, no comma before the word which. So, in principle, that's all of the basic theory about defining relative clauses, and we're going to do a little bit of practice with them in a moment. But I'll just give people a few seconds, just if anybody wants to ask any questions about this, please feel free to write it into the chat, and I'll be happy to answer any you have. I'll just give you a few seconds just in case anybody has any questions. Okay, doesn't look like we have any questions, so I think we can move forward, and yeah, we can now start our first task we're going to have a look at. So, to start with, I'm going to give you this task that we have here. As you can see, we have got 10 sentences, and I'm going to give you about 5 minutes, and I would like you to try to choose the correct alternative to complete the sentences. In each sentence you have 3 choices, and there is 1 correct answer in each. So, 5 minutes, can you have a look through these tasks, through these 10 sentences, and to try to choose the correct answers. So 5 minutes to have a look. And again, while you're doing this task, if you have any questions about the topic or anything else that you want to ask me about English or anything like that, please feel free to write it in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer any that you have. You can write in English, można ukrainskою, jak wam zrучніше. 2 more minutes, everybody, 2 minutes. Hi Alona, can we use the word before in the meaning of in front of? Yes, we can. Yeah, that is completely correct. It's a little bit more formal than just saying in front of, but it is possible. So we can say, for example, like I saw a man, I don't know, standing in front of me, but equally we can say I saw a man standing before me. Both of these are correct. As I said before, is a little bit higher register, a bit more formal, mainly more typical in literary English, but it's completely correct. So yes, you can. The word before has got many meanings in English, and one of these is the sense of in front of. Yeah, that's also possible. Okay, a few more seconds, everybody, and then we'll get the answers into the chat, or I'll put them in. Okay, so let's go through these together. So I will give you the answers. And then if you have any questions or anything that you're not sure about, I'll be happy to explain them as we go. So number one, we should have here the program that makes me laugh the most is The Simpsons. The program is not alive, it's a thing, it's an object, so we should use that here. Number two, my friend lives near the street where they filmed Notting Hill. This is a place, and so we have to use where in this situation. Number three, who is the actress whose husband is a famous director? Here we are showing possession. It's the husband of the actress, and so we should use whose. Number four, she explained the reason why she didn't act anymore. Here we're giving a reason, so why is the logical choice. 5, I will never forget the time when I saw Jude Law in the street. Here we have the time, so with times, as we talked about before, we normally use the word when. Number 6, the film, I can't write my correct answers, the film that we saw on Friday wasn't very good. Here, obviously, which would also be correct in this sentence, but we don't have which, so only that is the right choice here. Then number 7, what's the name of the actor? And again, here we should use that plays King Lear. Again, who would be possible, who would not be a mistake, but we don't have who as our options, so who or that for a person, so we should use that again. Number 8, I've still got that DVD which you lent me. Here we're talking about something that's not alive, it's an object, so which is the right choice. Number 9, that was the year when she appeared in her last film. So here we've got the year, which is a time, and so we should use when in this situation. And finally, number 10, is that the boy whose father is a film critic? It's the father of the boy, and so we should use whose to show possession, as we talked about before. So these are the correct answers. Does anybody have any questions before we do another practice task with defining relative clauses? I'll just give you a few seconds just to think. please send the link for the donation in the chat. Yes, I will. Just give me a moment. I just need to find it. Just make sure I've got the jar address correct. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that's the link to the collection for the for reabilitácia výskových. So yeah, if you can donate to this, I would be greatly appreciative. Obviously, if you can't, then I understand. But if you are able, it would be wonderful. Okay. So we don't seem to have any other questions here, so I think we can move forward to our second practice task, which is this one. So this task is a little bit shorter. Here we have 6 more sentences this time, and here I would like you to try and complete the sentences using the correct relative pronoun, so who, which, when, where, etc., but only if the relative pronoun is necessary. If you think it is not necessary, if you think we can skip it, then you should skip it with a line. So I'll give you about 3 or 4 minutes to try and complete this task, completing with a relative pronoun if it is necessary with the right word. So 3 or 4 minutes, and again, if you do have any other questions, please feel free to write them into the chat. Be happy to answer anything that you've got. Two minutes, everybody. One more minute. few more seconds, everyone. Okay, so let's have a look through these together. So once again, I will put the answers into the chat, but if you do have any questions, anything you're not sure about, again, don't be scared. I'll be happy to answer any questions we have. So for the first question, the correct answer that you should have here is nothing. There should be no word in here. I've been reading the book you gave me. You gave me the book. The book is the object of the relative clause, and so we can skip it, we don't need to use it. Of course, in the real world, you can say, I've been reading the book which you gave me, I've been reading the book that you gave me, but our task here was to use a relative pronoun only if it's necessary. And here it is not. So we can skip it and we're good. Number two, here there's a couple of possibilities. Here you can say a woman who lives in our building or a woman that lives in our building. Here we do need to use something because here it is the subject of the relative clause. The woman lives in our building, so the woman is the subject. So who or that, both are fine here. In number three, here, once again, we should have nothing, no article, not articles, they're a completely different problem. No relative pronoun in this space. And the reason why is, again, because it is the object. The girl, we have, I mentioned the girl to you, if we have normal English. So the girl is the object of the sentence, and so for that, we can skip the relative pronoun. Again, in the real world, you can say the girl who I mentioned to you, the girl that I mentioned to you, but here we don't need to use anything in this sentence. Number four, once again here is nothing. We should have no relative pronoun here. So we have the question, what was that nice song you were singing? You were singing a song. The song is the object of the relative clause, and so we can skip the relative pronouns. Once again, for real life English, you can use which, you can use that, but for this task, we don't need to use anything here. For number five, here we have two alternatives. Here we can use who or that. So here it is the subject of the relative clause because it was the man who was sitting next to you. And so for that reason, we can use the man who was sitting next to me or the man that was sitting next to me. It's the subject, so we must use something in this space. And finally, number six, here we should have the video. This video game is about a city which is in danger or that is in danger. Here it is the subject of the relative clause because it is the city in danger, and so we need to use which or that. We can't skip it here. We can't say about a city is in danger. It doesn't make sense here because it is the subject of the relative clause. So does anybody have any questions here? Just give you a few seconds to think before we move forward. No, everything seems to be okay. So we're now going to move forward then to the second type of relative clause which we have, which is the non-defining relative clause. And this is a different type to defining relative clauses, and there are quite a few more nuances with this type of relative clause. So as we said before, a defining relative clause is one where the information is necessary. We need it to know which one we are talking about. It's like the example that we had before, like with the sentence, that's the woman who helped me. Here, if we don't have who helped me, we have that's the woman. Okay, what woman? It's not complete, it's not finished. So this is a defining relative clause. A non-defining relative clause, which is the one that we're going to have a look at now, is one where we have extra information. And the information is not necessary for the sentence. We know which one we are talking about, even if we remove the relative clause from the sentence. So, with the example that I've given, Odessa, which is in Ukraine, is on the Black Sea. Here, the relative clause is which is in Ukraine. And if we remove this from the sentence, we have Odessa is on the Black Sea. And that is a completely grammatically correct, normal sentence. And so because of this, we consider this as extra information. We don't need it for the meaning. To give the same idea, we don't need it to know which one we're talking about. Now, with non-defining relative clauses, when we give this extra information, we always use commas with these non-defining relative clauses. And as you can see in the sentence example which I gave you, we have Odessa, comma, which is in Ukraine, comma, is on the Black Sea. And this is the main, or one of the main differences between non-defining and defining relative clauses. So if the information is extra and we don't need it for the sentence, we always use commas. But if the information is needed, if we need this information to know which one we're talking about, we never use commas. So this is one of the principal differences between them, is with the commas. Again, as I mentioned before, this thing with commas is often a very difficult topic for Ukrainian speakers of English, because in your language you use commas much more often than we do in English. It's a much more typical feature of the Ukrainian language, is the number of commas. And so, yeah, it's important that when you are building these types of sentences, you think very carefully about, okay, is this necessary? Is this not necessary? What information am I giving here? And then that will tell you if you need to use a comma or not. Continuing on with this, the word that is never correct in non-defining relative clauses. So the word that we can never use in these types of constructions. So, for example, I've given you the sentence, my father, who is 60, works in a bank. This is a non-defining relative clause. We are giving extra information about my father, and so we have the commas, and so this means that we cannot say, my father, that is 60, works in a bank. This would be a mistake. So when you are building these constructions, one thing that you can perhaps remember is that if you have comma that, this will almost certainly be a mistake, because we cannot use that in non-defining relative clauses, and if you have a comma, it must be non-defining. So these two things can't go together when you are constructing, when you're building these types of sentences. And the final sort of little bit of theory before we do some practice is that in non-defining relative clauses, we can never remove the relative pronoun. So as you remember from the defining relative clauses, if we have got the relative pronoun as an object, we can skip it. But here, in non-defining relative clauses, you must always use the relative pronoun. So we always need to use who or which or where or why or whatever it is. you can never skip it when we have this extra information. So with the example sentence I've given you, Sasha, comma, who is Ukrainian, comma, helped me to translate the letter. So here, who is Ukrainian is extra information, which is why we have the commas around it. But we cannot skip the relative pronoun. So we cannot say, Sasha is Ukrainian, help me to translate the letter. So you'll always need to use the relative pronoun in these types of sentences. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for the theory for non-defining relative clauses. Does anybody have any questions here before we do some practice? Just give you a few seconds if anyone wants to formulate any. Okay, looks like everything is clear. So we have 3 tasks left to go now. We're going to do 2 tasks specifically with non-defining relative clauses, and then we have 1 final task where we have non-defining and defining together, and we'll do that to finish up with. But first of all, we've got... okay, I have a question here. Чому назва relative? It's called relative because the second part of the sentence, it is relative, so it's like, how do you say in Ukrainian, sort of відношене, to the other part of the sentence. So it's not an absolute clause. What it is depends on what comes first, and this is why we call it relative, because it depends on something else. It's not an independent clause, and so it depends on what comes first, and because it's dependent, we name this as relative. And that's why it's there. Okay, so let's do some practice. So I'm going to give you here this short task, just maybe about 3 minutes for this should be okay. Here we have got a short text about jazz. As you can see, we have got 5 spaces in the text, and I would like you to complete them with the correct relative pronoun. So with which, who, when, etc. I'll give you a couple of minutes to have a look. So Katarina, the letter which or that is from Ukrainian was deleted. I'm not quite sure I understand your question, what you mean here. Which letter do you mean? One more minute, everybody. Okay, so let's have a look through these answers together then here. So we have 0 as our example, jazz, comma, which is one of the most popular types of music. Then for number 1, it developed in the south of the country. Here, obviously, the country is a place, and so we should use where in this case, where many African Americans lived. Number 2, it became popular in the 1920s when people could hear it on the radio. Here we're talking about a time, so we should use when. Number 3, Louis Armstrong, who was a well-known singer. Here we have a comma, so we know it's non-defining, and so because of that, as we've said before, that is not possible here. Like, we can never use that after the comma in these non-defining relative clauses. Number 4, another important performer was Duke Ellington, whose band was one of the greatest jazz bands of all time because it's his band, the band belongs to him, and so we should use whose. And then finally, number 5, for example, bossa nova, which began in the late 1950s. Bossa nova is a type of style, so it's a thing, so we should use which here. And again, that is not possible because it's a non-defining relative clause. Does anybody have any questions here? Okay, so let's move forward then to our second task, to practice task number 2. So here we have got 6 pairs of sentences. I would like you to try to join the sentences together. Every sentence will need a non-defining relative clause, so with commas, and you should use the underlined sentence in the relative clause or as part of the relative clause. So for example, we have Shrewsbury is a small town. It is in the west of England. It is in the west of England is underlined, so we need to use this in our relative clause. So rewritten, Shrewsbury, comma, which is in the west of England, comma, is a small town. So we give the same information, but in one sentence with the relative clause as it's underlined. So I will give you about 5-6 minutes for this, and then we'll check together after you've had the chance to have a look at this. Too quickly. That message. Again, as I said before, if you do have any other questions, anything you want to ask about, please feel free to ask me. That's what I'm here for. 2 more minutes, everybody. One more minute. A few more seconds, everybody. Okay, so let's go through these together then. So once again, I will share the answers, but as always, if you do have any questions or anything that you're not sure about, please feel free to put a message into the chat and I'll be happy to answer them. So our first one, which I accidentally sent a little bit earlier than I should have done, we should have the River Severn, comma, which goes through the town, comma, is the longest river in Britain. Here, the River Severn, of course, is an object, and so because of this, we need to use the word which, and that is not possible here, again, because it's a non-defining relative clause, and so it will be a mistake in this case. Then on to our second one. Here we should have Charles Darwin, comma, whose statue stands outside the library, comma, was born in Shrewsbury. Here we need to use whose because it is the statue of Charles Darwin, so we show possession. And so again, whose and with the commas with each part of the relative clause. Then for number 3, I'll just correct my sentence myself here. So here we should have Wilfred Owen, comma, who was a famous poet, comma, also lived in Shrewsbury. Here we are talking about a person, very famous person, and so again with who with the relative pronoun and the commas to separate them as always. Then on to number 4, here we should have the castle, comma, which is also a museum, comma, is on a hill above the town. So the castle, comma, which is also a museum, comma, is on a hill above the town. The castle obviously is an object, and so we should use which to show the connection between them. Now, number 5, this is not exactly a tricky one, but it's one to maybe a small potential to get this wrong. So here we should have, there are a lot of good restaurants, comma, where you can enjoy a wide range of food. So here we're talking about a place in this situation because we have you can enjoy a wide range of food there. We're referring to the place in this situation. When we have words like there or here, it's about the place. And so we use where to connect the sentences. And the final one we should have here for number 6, the Shrewsbury Flower Show, comma, which is held every year, comma, attracts a lot of visitors. So here again, extra information. So we have the commas around the relative clause, and we should use which because the Shrewsbury Flower Show, it's a thing, it's not a person or anything like this, and so we use which in this case. So, does anybody have any questions here? Let's give you a few seconds to think, just make sure everything is clear. Okay, looks like we've got no questions here, so now we will go to our final task for this lesson today. And for our last task, we are going to look at both types of relative clause. So here you can see that we have got 8 sentences, well 9 if we include the example. You need to complete the sentences. We have the relative clauses in the box. They are already there for you. With the relative clauses, you don't need to change anything or use different pronouns. Everything is already correct. But you need to match them to the correct sentence, and you need to decide if we should have commas or not. So remember, if you think that the information is necessary, we need it to identify what we're talking about, then we don't use commas. But if you believe that the information is extra and it is not necessary for the sentence, then we need to use commas in this case. So I'll give you about, again, 5 or 6 minutes. Can you please try and complete them? And then, we'll have a look together before we finish up. As always, while you're doing this, if you do have any other questions, please feel free to ask them. 2 minutes, everybody. You said before we finish up, why is it not just finished? What's the difference? So the short answer is that there is no practical difference in meaning between these two, but in spoken English, we usually prefer to use phrasal verbs. Finish up is an example of a phrasal verb. And if we have the opportunity, we usually prefer to use phrasal verbs in spoken English if we can. I mean, like for practical meaning, like the meaning of the sentence, yeah, before we finish up, there's no real difference in meaning here. But in the language, we have a tendency to use phrasal verbs as much as we can. They're a very, very typical feature of spoken English. And so, yeah, it's what I prefer to use when I'm speaking, and what most native speakers, at least British native speakers, prefer to use. Phrasal verbs are a bit of a nightmare, to tell you the truth, because we have thousands of them in the English language, and obviously the prepositions that you need to use are very precise and sometimes not obvious which ones are necessary in which situations. But it's just because, yeah, as I said, like we have a tendency to use them in spoken English. Just if we have the option, we prefer to use phrasal verbs, and that's why. It's just a feature of language more than anything else. So, yeah. But phrasal verbs are, they're not easy, I have to tell you. They're really not. Maybe I'll do a lesson on phrasal verbs in the future. We'll see how we get on today. Okay, a few more seconds, everybody, and then we'll put these together before we finish up. Okay, so let's go through these together. We'll check these answers, and then if we have any final questions after this, I'll be happy to answer them, and then I think that'll do for today. So number one, here we have they've got a coach, and here we should have who used to be a professional footballer. Here we do not need to use commas, because this is necessary information, because if we say they've got a coach, okay, which coach? What coach? I don't know anything about this coach. And so for that reason, we should have no commas here, because we need to identify which one we're talking about, and it's the one who used to be a professional footballer. Number two, I got this information from that website which you showed me. Again, no comma here, because we need to define which website we're talking about. Here, if we just say, I got this information from that website, okay, which website? Like, again, I don't know which one you're talking about. It's not clear to me. So here we should not use commas, because here we are giving necessary, essential information. Now to number three, here we should have my favourite song is What a Wonderful World. Obviously the continuation is which my mother used to sing to me, but now in this situation we do need to use a comma here, because my favourite song, What a Wonderful World, that is a grammatically correct sentence. The sentence makes sense as it is. It's logical. If we say my favourite song is What a Wonderful World, krapka, it makes sense, it's all good, and so that's okay. Then number 4, we've got here, Sam missed the last train, comma, which left at 11 p.m. Because once again here we have got the complete idea. Sam missed the last train. Okay, there's only one last train. I know which train we're talking about. So which left at 11 p.m. is extra information about the train. And so here we should use the comma in this case. Then number 5, here we should have, he discussed it with his father, who advised him to forget about it. And here again we need to have a comma, because we have, he discussed it with his father. Okay, we know who the father is. We don't need any more information to identify the father. So the rest of the sentence is extra. This is not necessary information, and so we should have the comma with it. Number 6, here we have what's the name of that shop which sells very cheap clothes, and here we don't have a comma because this is necessary information. If you just say what's the name of that shop, okay, which shop? Again, I don't know which shop you're talking about. It's not clear to me. I don't know who it is. I don't know which shop it is. So here we don't have a comma because it is necessary information for the sentence. Number 7, he was upset about the match which they lost 4-0. Here we do need to have a comma because obviously he is upset about the most recent match or the latest match, the match that has just happened. So we know which match you are talking about, which one you are referring to, and so which they lost 4-0 is just extra information about why he is upset, and so we should use the comma here. And the final sentence, number 8, they still haven't found the man who stole the painting, and here we do not need a comma in this situation because we need to know which man you are talking about. They still haven't found the man. Okay, what man? We don't know. So this is necessary information for the sentence. So in principle, that's pretty much everything. That's all of the basic theory and a few tasks for around sort of B1, B2 with relative clauses. Does anybody have any questions about this or anything else they would like to ask me before we finish for today? Just give you a few seconds to think if there are any. Okay, so it doesn't look like we've got any questions, so I think in that case we can finish for today. So I'll switch to Ukrainian for the end. So дуже вам дякую за участь. Я щиро сподіваюся, що це було корисним для вас усіх. Я розумію, що це не найлегша тема, relative clauses, але це дуже важлива тема. Ми так виживаємо щодня, це дуже часто можна зустрічатися, тому це дуже важливо, що ми розуміємо, як це працює. То дуже вам дякую за участь ще раз. Бажаю вам гарного дня. Бережіть себе. Слава Україні. До побачення.